Hi everybody, welcome to my magical inquiry tour. My name is Catherine and today I want to show you how I created this card that I'm calling Moongazing. The background for this card is loosely based on Lavinia's Dreamscape papers. As you can see, they're very colorful and beautiful, but none of them have a moon on them, and I'm not quite sure how to create that look onto a paper that's pre-printed. So we are going to make our own. Let's talk about the supplies we need to get started. Today we'll be using a piece of multivarious cardstock, and I have cut this down to 4 7/8 by 5 7/8, along with a piece of coordinating colored cardstock that I've cut down to 5 by 7, and then of course my 7 by 10 card base folded in half to create a 5 by 7 card. For stamps, we'll be using the foliage set, and we'll be only using this little flower right here in the middle, stars 2, stones small, willow, silver song willow left, and silver song willow right, stargazing, and see a fairy make a wish. If you don't have this particular background stamp in your collection, any stamp with script will do. I'll be using my stencil, and this one is called the White Orbs, and we'll also be using some acetate circle masks. To stamp my main image, I will be using my Sweet Petunia Misty to make sure I get a really nice crisp image. And of course, we'll need a variety of blending brushes and a fan brush or any paintbrush for splatter. You'll want a sponge for your pan pastels, a wink of Stella. I have a soft pastel pencil in white and also a Posca pen in white. For a little sparkle at the end, I'll be using some turquoise stickles. Any blue will do, or coordinating color. And then my titanium white pan pastel. For inks, I'll be using a few from the Elements line. I have dark denim, lime punch, blue atoll, violet chalk, and lemon drop. And then in my VersaFine Claire collection, I'll be using Grass Green, Fantasia, and Twilight. Let's pull this all together and get started. So creating these backgrounds is all about layering. We're going to begin with a layer of each of these main colors that we're going to be using today. And we're probably going to give this 2 or 3 passes. All right, so the first thing I want to do is create my moon with my Lemon Drop Elements ink. Now I'm mostly going to pick this up from my pad, and you can blend it out in the lid of your ink pad in the cover. And we'll just start by creating a moon right in the middle. Now, because we are going to be doing lots of layers, it's okay to go really light because we're going to be building it up. And one thing I've noticed about working with multivarious cardstock is that when we're working with multivarious, you'll notice sometimes that your ink goes onto your paper just a little splotchy, but if you give it a few minutes, it sort of spreads out and soaks into the paper and it blends really nicely. So don't worry too much about splotches. Plus, we're going to be doing lots of layers, so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, I have a good coat of yellow right here. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in my moon mask and place it right over my yellow, and that will keep the integrity of my yellow. I'm going to come back with a little bit of my lime punch because lime green is my favorite color. And once again, we'll just dab it off onto the brush, and then give it a little swirl in the lid because we'll be able to pick up some ink from there later. And I'm going to come in and just add a little bit to the corners at the top of my design on each side. And then later I might want the illusion of some grass, so I'm going to bring a little bit down here towards the bottom of my card. See, we have a little bit of a swirl mark here, but like I said, once we come back and it has a little time to sit, it's going to just blend out and we're not even going to notice that. It's a little hot here today, so I'm going to make sure that I'm covering my inks in between using my different colors. And I'm going to come back and use my blue atoll next. So again, just picking up a little bit of ink on my brush and blending it out into my lid. You can also add some here. We'll be using that later. And let's go ahead and fill in around some of that green. I'm going to stay away from the moon for just the time being because we're going to create a purple glow around that moon with our violet chalk. Okay, there we go. That's enough blue to start with. Let's come back with the violet, not violent, chalk. And I'm going to focus on just creating a little bit of purple glow around my circle mask. Oh, look at that. I already have a bunch in the lid. So I'll just pick it up here. And starting in the middle of my mask, I'm just going to come off around the edge. And we'll go all the way around the moon. Again, not worrying about being too heavy because we're going to add at least 2 more layers to this card topper. Okay, there we go. We have that. All right, remember I said we're going to use some of this blue right here. At this point, I'm going to bring in my spray bottle. I'm going to add, let me slide this over a little. I'm going to add a little water to my blue atoll ink that's on my blending mat. And I'm just going to use my fingertips to pick a little bit up and create some craters in my moon with that blue. So we'll do a few on each side. And you can move it around and add more if you need to. All right, let's give it a little blast with the heat tool. And I still have a little bit left, so I'm going to add a little more and see if we can turn some of this green tones into a little bit more of a blue shade. And if we can't, it's not the end of the world. Pick up a little bit with a paper towel and just add a little more blue. And let's go ahead and give it another blast. All right, that's pretty dry, so let's go ahead and cover it back up with the mask. And this is the point where we're going to bring in just a little bit of water. So I'm going to use my mister or spray bottle and just add a little water to my mat and pick it up with my fan brush, getting that nice and wet. All right, and then we're just going to tap it over the card. Now, some people will pick this up with a paper towel, but you get a much different look if you just let it dry. It will pull together some of the colors, and as we start to build up layers of colors, it'll even pull some of that bottom color from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to let this dry naturally and give it a few minutes, and I'll be back. So I've given my first layer a little bit of time to dry. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add some more color on top of that first layer. So I think I'm going to come back and I'm going to start with some blue atoll, and I'm going to bring a little bit of it in over the green, the lime green that I have happening on my card. So again, we'll just pick up some of the ink and blend it off into the lid. And I want to hold that circle mouse down because I just do want to keep the integrity of that moon. You can start off the corner of your card and just bring it in. Remember to just go lightly. We don't need to have real heavy strokes with our brush here. We just, at this point, want to be building up some of that color. Just lots of light layers will be fine. I'm going to switch out my blue atoll for some more violet chalk. And I'm going to mix it in a little bit with that blue. I just love the look of these two colors layered over on top of each other. So we'll do a little there. I'll bring some down into the bottom on each corner. And then I'm going to go up the other side, but I'm going to turn it so it's a little bit easier to work with. Just coming off the side of the page and onto that card. Let's go ahead and put it in between this blue and green. And I'll add a little more just around the moon, just to build it up a little bit. And we'll add a little more splatter with our water. And I'm going to walk away and just give it some time to dry. I'll see you in a few minutes. I've given my background enough time to dry. It's dry to the touch. It's been sitting for a bit of time. Before I add any of my pan pastel orbs, what I want to do is stamp at least the main image on the card, because what I learned from my sample was that if I put down the pan pastels and try to stamp over it, you can still see those orbs. So we're going to stamp our fairies and then work on those orbs. So I'm going to use my Misty. I do like how it lines up because I can just push everything right into that corner. And if it moves at all, I can put it right back in the corner again and we're good to go. And I'm going to stamp the fairies using Twilight from VersaFine Clair. Okay, and it looks like it could use one more stamp. Try not to shake the desk too much. All right, there we go. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to just put this aside for now. And let's cover our ink. And I'm going to come back with just a little sponge and my white pan pastels. And we're going to add some orbs onto the image. I'm going to use this section up here that has mostly smaller orbs. And we're just going to go around the moon. They're going to be very faint, but they will show up. And we'll go up here a little bit. And we're just going to make sure that we avoid the moon with these. Okay, and then we're going to add some more with our violet chalk and our blue atoll. There's some blue. Let's add some violet. And we'll just overlap them a little bit. Just be sure to avoid that moon. All right, and I do want to come back and add just a little more of the pan pastels to soften it a bit. And that's going to soften some of that bright color. All right, and I think that's enough for the orbs. We're going to begin with the See a Fairy, Make a Wish stamp, and we're going to do that in second generation all around the side of the card topper. All right. So just stamp it off on the paper and then add it to the top. You don't even have to ink the whole stamp because we're really just stamping the edge of our card. So there's no need to ink up that whole stamp. And let's do just a little more across the top. All right, there we have that. Now I'm going to bring in the small stones and we're going to stamp them alongside the fairy, and I'm going to stamp that in Twilight because that's how we stamped our fairies, and I just want the stones to blend out. So we'll just line them up right here. I'm not sure why I didn't get a great imprint there, but that's okay. We're going to cover that up with some flowers and things after. Okay, so that worked. All right. I'm going to use a piece of paper just as a mask to kind of cover the rocks as I stamp the trees, and I'm going to stamp the trees in Fantasia. And then we'll do the other one. There we go, they're framing that nicely. Let's use the flower stamp from the foliage, and we're just going to create some flowers coming out of those rocks. And one little bunch down here. All right, and now we can work on the other side. And finally, let's add a few stars. So I'm going to do a couple coming off the top of my card and then coming down to the moon. Can do a few over here. And just to balance it out a little, I'm going to add one more down below the moon to the right. Okay, there we go. Our stamping is finished. Let's come back in and add a few finishing touches. All right, so I want to make sure everything is dry. I'm going to just flip that over onto my scrap paper and give it a little bit of a rub. We don't want it to smudge. And I'm going to bring in my dark denim ink, and I'm just going to add it to the edges of our card so it looks a little more like nighttime. I'm going to start up here, and I just really love the way, I want to make sure you can see, I love the way the denim covers the green, and I just think it makes such a pretty color. And then we're going to come up the other side. And right up to this other corner and across the top. There we go. I'm going to bring my moon mask back and put it over that moon. And what I want to do is just add one more layer of some water splatter. And I could spray it right from my bottle onto my card, but I do like the effect that I get with the fan brush. Make sure that's just covered. Okay. And as I was adding that, I noticed that I forgot to come back in with my detail brush and just fill in these rocks, and that will also make the little mistake that I made right here blend in a little better. So I'm going to give it a few minutes to dry, and then I'm going to come back and we'll finish that up. So once again, all of our little water splatters are dry. Look at how sweet those are. You can see all of the color underneath each of those splats, which I think is kind of cool. All right, just want to make sure we can see this. I now am going to come back with my dark denim and just fill in those stones like we talked about a moment ago. And we'll just shade them in a bit. And if you wanted to, while you're at it, it's a good time to shade in our little fairies if we needed to, or however you like to touch them up. And add just a little bit of shading behind them. They have a little bit of a shadow cast from the moon. Right, that looks pretty good to me. I do want to paint their wings, so I'm going to use a little bit of my ink. I'm going to use some of my violet chalk and a little bit of blue atoll. Excuse me. And my Wink of Stella to pick that up and paint them in so that we have some nice shimmery fairy wings. Okay, there's that. And let's add a little bit of shimmer across the project. So I'll make sure it's flowing. And just use the back of a brush to help me give it a little tap. And so we're just adding a little bit of magic here with this. And if you wanted to, you could even come back in and add a little shimmer along the edge of the moon. Just make sure you're not coloring it purple or blue, since we just used those two colors. I'm going to add a little bit of some fairy orbs using my Posca pen. So we just give it a little shake to prime it up. And make sure it's flowing. And once again, I'll use my paintbrush just to add a little splatter. I'm trying not to get too much on my fairies, but a little bit is okay. Give it a blast with my heat gun. At this point, we can bring in our pastel pencil and add a little bit of highlights. Just thinking about where the moon would be shining. I'm just going to do the fairies, but certainly you could add more if you wanted to. Wherever you would like to do it on your card. Some people might want to do the leaves of the trees. I'm good with this. All right, and the last step is to add some stickles. So I have a turquoise color, which blends nicely with my background. So I keep taking away my paper, and really I should have it to use. I'm going to give it a little squeeze to make sure I like how it's flowing out of there and that my dots are not going to be too big. Yeah, we don't have any big clogs. And I'll just add a few around our fairies, little magic fairy dust, and going up my tree. And maybe a few on my branches. Add as many as you like, whatever makes you happy. And I'm going to turn it around and do the same on the other side, but I don't want to get my hands in it, so I'm going to start over here. And just add some going up my tree and a few in my branches. All right, give it a few minutes to dry. My card is dry, it's ready to assemble, and I'm just going to use my Bippity Boppity glue from Lavinia. And since I have such a small space on my mats, I just want to use the glue in case it doesn't go down properly and I need to readjust it. It just makes it easier to do. It gives you a few seconds before it's really set up. Okay, and that's looking pretty straight to me. So I'm just give it a good press down. Make sure it's stuck down there really well. And then I'm just going to adhere this base to my card. And there we go. How fun was that? So I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please hit the thumbs up because it really does help me be seen by other stampers who might want to learn how to make these fun, beautiful backgrounds on their own, and share my video with anybody you think would enjoy them. See you soon.